As soon as Facepunch implemented the zip lines going from the power stacks all around the map, we knew that it was only going to be a matter of time before somebody came up with a way that we can put the zipline tool in a player's hand so that they can create their own zip lines. And thanks to Black Lightning, we didn't have to wait for very long, less than a month since the implementation of the zip lines, and he's already written a plugin that does exactly that. Hey everyone, welcome back to Rust Admin Academy. I hope you're having a wonderful day. On this channel, I do plugin reviews, tutorials, plus I want to show you all of the different tips and tricks you need to know to have a successful Rust server. So if this is your first time to the channel, make sure you click on that red subscribe button down below the video so that you stay up to date on everything that we're working on. So just recently posted to Lone.Design, we have deployable ziplines. Yes, this is a premium plugin and cost is $15 US. Before I started production on this video, I did reach out to Black Lightning and ask if he was willing to do a promo code for my viewers only. And of course, he obliged us. So if you decide that you want to try deployable ziplines on your server, make sure you use the promo code DZSRTBull at checkout to save yourself 20%. I'll put that promo code in the pinned comment down below as well. So a couple of things you need to know about the plugin before we actually get started. Obviously, it allows the player to deploy a zipline from point A to point B. This is done using a custom skinned crossbow, and there's a couple of different ways that you can acquire said crossbow and the cable that goes along with it, but don't worry, we're going to get into that in just a couple of minutes. The zipline does in fact work in both directions, even if it's uphill. This feature is definable in the configuration file. If you don't want it to be bi-directional on your server, it doesn't have to be. The plugin comes with extensive configuration options so you can make it work exactly as you need it to on your server, considering balance. You can integrate deployable ziplines with server rewards or economics so that you can sell the gear to your players. It also works really well with no escape, so if your players are raid blocked or combat blocked, they can't deploy a zipline if you set it up that way in the config file. It also integrates with the remover tool so that the player can actually have a couple of different ways of removing the zipline after they've deployed it. All right, let's dive right into the plugin because that's way more fun. All right, so first things first, of course, this plugin comes with permissions, and thankfully Black Lightning has done 3 pre-configured permissions levels so that we can play around with this plugin right out of the box. So today I'm going to be using Permissions Manager by Stina Maru to control the different permissions. Let's hop into deployable ziplines here. And as you can see here, we've got 3 different permissions profiles that are already set up with the plugin. We're going to get into the details in the configuration file in just a minute, but I just wanted to show you the different options that are available. So we've got a balanced profile, we've got a fun profile, plus we've got an unrestricted profile. Obviously the unrestricted profile basically has no rules attached to it, and you probably don't want that, but it's definitely super fun for testing. And then the last 2 permissions here allow the player to actually utilize the built-in purchase ability in the plugin to get the zipline tool and the cable that is required to go with it. Basically, if you don't have either one of these 2 permissions granted to your default group, they won't be able to use the plugin to get the tool required to make this work. They would have to find it in the loot table somewhere, providing of course you're using a loot controller that allows you to put items in there with custom skins. Don't worry, we're going to get into that in just a second. Or alternatively, you allow the player to purchase these items from the vending machine, which is exactly what I did on my server. So I'm going to show you exactly what I did there. But when deciding whether to grant these 2 permissions to your default group or not, you need to decide if you want the player to be able to buy this equipment from the plugin or if they have to find it somewhere else in the server. So just to see a real life example of what that looks like, we go in chat, we do /zipline space buy. This would allow us to buy the actual zipline tool, which is what you can see I'm holding in my hands right now. And because we didn't grant those permissions, it says you don't have the permissions required to do that. Same thing for /zipline space buy cable. It's going to say the same thing. You don't have the permission required to do that. If I go back into my permissions manager and grant those 2 permissions, obviously now we will be able to. So in chat /zipline buy again, and then it allows us to purchase the zipline tool, of course, providing that we have the required scrap in our inventory. So now as you can see, I have 2. Obviously I don't need to, so I'm just going to toss one away. And the same thing obviously goes with the cable. All right, so let's quickly blast through the configuration file. So the first option is all about the actual zipline tool itself. Obviously this is the item right here, and then this is the skin associated with it. Don't change either one of these. Obviously you need to have that item and this skin associated with it in order for this to actually work. And then down below that is how they can actually purchase the zipline tool. So obviously if you're going to use economics, you would toggle that to true. If you're going to use server rewards, you would toggle that to true. If you don't want to use either one of those things, you can just leave it at the default purchase of scrap, but just make sure you grant that permission so that they can actually purchase it from the plugin itself. Now, if you wanted to change it up so that they weren't purchasing it with scrap, let's say you wanted to use stones or blood or whatever else you can find in the server, you can change that up right here. You can change the currency required to buy the actual zipline. zipline, and then how much of whatever that item is. Obviously you can configure that here as well. Down below that is the actual cable item required for ziplines to work. So obviously we've got the rope with this skin ID on it so that it actually looks like cable, and it does. And then same thing, how we're going to actually purchase it, whether we're using server rewards, economics, or just the default plugin's ability to sell the cable. Down below that, there's a couple of pickup restrictions. Do we want to require a hammer or a zipline tool in order to pick up the zipline? Yes or no, true or false? And do we want to allow the zipline to be picked up inside of a building blocked area? You can also control the decay settings. So how long is that zipline going to last before it actually decays and falls apart? Default is set to 60 minutes. And then we get down into the permissions profiles. Now, like I said before, there's 3 different profiles already built in. I'm not going to go through each one. Just know that all 3 profiles are exactly the same as far as features goes, but you can go in and mess with the balancing of each one of those profiles if you decide to. Allow the tool to be used in a building block zone, true or false? Default is false. Do you want to allow bi-directional ziplines? True or false? Zipline minimum length, zipline maximum length. You can even control the angle required and the elevation change, all within each individual permissions profile. Cooldown on uses. What is the maximum number of ziplines each player can have? By default, this is set to 4. How much cable costs per meter, and whether or not you actually want to refund the cable once they pick that zipline back up. Now, the next section here is really important that you pay attention to what you're doing if you go in and make any changes. This is the start point rule set, and then down below that is the end point rule set. It comes down to things like, do you want the player to be allowed to deploy while they're building blocked, as in they're in somebody else's building area? And also, do you want them to be able to zipline into somebody else's building blocked area? So be very careful with how you change these settings. By default, the endpoint rule is no, they can't zipline into somebody else's building blocked area. If for whatever reason you decided to change this to true, obviously players would be able to zip line down right into somebody's base. Even if they had stone walls up or whatever, they could zip line right onto somebody's roof if they wanted to. You can define the max deployment distance, so how much cable can they actually deploy on their zip line. By default, this is set to 100. I actually feel that that's actually maybe a little bit short. I might go to 150. I might even go to 200 on my actual live server, but I'm going to play around with it for a little while and see what my players think it should be. Disallowed topology. This basically by default is set up so that people can't zip line directly into a monument. If you do want your players to be able to zip line into monuments, make sure you take this section out. And then if you're using no escape on your server, this is where you define whether they can actually deploy a zip line if they're combat blocked or raid blocked. And that basically does it for the permissions profiles. That one that we just went over was the balanced profile. Down below that, you can see the fun profile. And then if we keep scrolling down a little bit, you're going to see the unrestricted profile. If you wanted to, you might grant that to your admin group or your moderators, something like that. But you probably don't want your default group to have access to the unrestricted permission profile. But maybe you do. That's up to you. So it's a relatively simple configuration file. It might look a little bit big at first glance, but once you break it down into 3 different permissions profiles, it's actually not that bad. So like I said earlier, I am actually using this plugin on my live server, not just my test server. And I decided that in my specific situation, I didn't want the players to be able to actually buy the equipment directly from the plugin. So what I did is I used a plugin called Custom Vending Setup and made it so that they had to come to this vending machine at my outpost, and then they can purchase the zipline tool as well as the cable. So as you can see here at the bottom of my list, providing my fat head's not in the way, you can see that they can buy the crossbow as well as the cable here. But I also mentioned earlier that you could add this to your loot table. So as long as you're using a loot controller that allows you to specify an item with a specific item ID. If we go back over to the configuration file, you can see that the zipline tool is in fact the crossbow, but it's with this specific skin ID. Same thing goes with the cable itself. It's just rope, which we can find normally, but it has this specific skin ID, which makes it look like cable. It has to be those 2 specific skin IDs. I can't stress this to you enough. All right, so once we have our zipline tool and the cable that's required to operate it, of course, we just equip the zipline tool like we would any other weapon. And as you can see in chat there, it says attack to set the start point. So where do we want the zipline to actually start? And of course, we just aim and shoot just like this. And then it says in chat, attack to set the endpoint. Now, because I have the unrestricted permission granted to me, I could shoot my crossbow onto the roof of this base right here and it will deploy. But for right now, let's just shoot it down here next to that bear. And as you can see, it deployed a zipline. So in order to use it, I'm sure you're used to using the zipline already. You use it the exact same way. You just press your use button as you're looking up at the cable. Another thing you'll notice when you actually equip the crossbow is it actually says toggle bi-directional mode using MMB, which means middle mouse button. So by default, this is disabled, but because we have the permission allowed to to use bidirectional zip lines, we just click on our middle mouse button and then we can deploy the zip line again, doing the exact same thing. But now, since we're at the bottom of the zip line, we can go back up. Just like that. And if we wanted to remove this zip line, of course, once we have the actual zip line tool equipped in our hands, we just go up to the wooden spear and we can click on the use button again and it will remove it, and it puts all that cabling back in our inventory. If the configuration file is set up that way, you can make it not go back into the inventory as well. You can also do the same thing with the hammer, providing of course you have build priv, or if the server that you're using this on has the remover tool, that will work as well. Now, before I get all lit up in the comments, I know there is another option out there for zip lines, and I'm not saying that one is better, one is worse. I don't get into that kind of politics. What I do know about this one is that I decided to put it on my own personal live server. I reached out to the developer to ask them for permission to actually do a video on their plugin. They didn't come to me asking me to do it for them. And without hesitation, as soon as I asked for a promo code, they were more than willing to do that for me. So read into that what you will. I like deployable zip lines. I haven't tried the alternative, so I can't really say whether I like that or not, but I did decide to put this on my own personal server. All right, that basically sums it up for deployable zip lines. Make sure you guys go check it out on Lone.Design. And if you do decide that you want to put this on your server, make absolutely sure you use my promo code DZSRTBull, or if you're in the United States, it's DZSRTBull. I don't judge. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, you have to leave me a thumbs up. It helps me out more than you can ever imagine, and it costs you no effort to do it. If you didn't like this video, you can of course leave me a thumbs down, but please leave me a comment in the comment section down below so that I know how I can better serve you. Thank you all so much for watching. I put out a brand new video every Friday at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So until next Friday, I hope you guys are staying safe and taking care of each other. Thanks for watching. I'll see you then.